The 643rd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh, Nathan here with you guys on a Sunday night, almost 24 hours or so after Carolina beat Wake Forest 87-84 last night in the Smith Center. And we're here to talk about that. Obviously, there's a win, a milestone win for the program as it was the 500th win in the history of the Smith Center, and we celebrate winning on the podcast. There's also some issues that really surfaced last night that I think we really have to address moving forward because, quite simply, this was not a game that should have been as close as it was, and we've got to figure out if this can be fixed or we're talking about a team that maybe is overrated right now despite being 14-2 and 2-1 in the ACC. We'll give our quote from Hubert Davis. We'll take a look at the box score. You'll give our stat of the game and so much more. But we'll go ahead and just dive right into this initial recap. Carolina wins 87-84. As I mentioned, they are 14-2 and 2-1 in the league. They improved 11-0 at home. As I mentioned, they pick up the 500th win all-time in the history of the Dean Dome. They were led by their two best players, Henri Veesaar, who had 25 points and 9 rebounds, and Caleb Wilson had 22 points and 12 rebounds. I think it's the 11th double-double of the season for Carolina. The issue, though, with Caleb Wilson and the performance last night, only 2 shot attempts registered in the second half after going 7 for 7 in the first half. Carolina built a 15-point lead in the ball game last night. Before they had a 7-minute drought without making a field goal that allowed Wake Forest to cut the lead all the way down to 1. It was 75-74 deep into the ball game last night before Carolina would go on to preserve the win. Big reason why Wake Forest was phenomenal from deep. They go 14 of 35 as a team. It was really 2 players that killed them. It was Juke Harris, their best player, who was 5 of 12 from 3. And then Nate Calmes was 7 of 11 from behind the three-point line. So after getting, bombarded from behind the three-point line against SMU, it happens again. And luckily Carolina was able to escape with the victory. It was a game that Carolina led and controlled throughout. There was no doubt who the better team was. They led by 11 at halftime. They built, I think 15 was the largest lead at one point in the second half. But as Hubert Davis said, they took their foot off the gas. About 9 minutes to go, it felt like Carolina thought the game was over, and then they had to really scramble, and they made just enough free throws late to preserve a win, which had me basically yelling and screaming at my television, not in a happy way, but in an anger way, because, and it's probably why it's a good thing I'm not a coach, and it's probably a good thing that I'm just a podcaster, but that game should be treated as if Carolina lost the game. That would have been my message, because a lot of the issues that came out of the game last night, the perimeter defense, the lack of free throw shooting, the lack of urgency down the stretch, if none of that stuff gets corrected before Carolina heads west, we'll be talking about a team coming back from the West Coast with a 2-game losing streak and really trying to figure out where this team could be headed the rest of the way.
Well, at least one loss, right? I mean, Stanford's playing incredibly well. Cal playing a little bit better as well. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, it's unbelievable how bad that finish was for Carolina, because it wasn't just the defensive end of the floor. Defensive end of the floor was not great. You needed to find a way to take away Nate Calmes. You couldn't do it. He got, again, we've talked about this so often here recently, guys just being able to get wherever they want to on the floor. And that's what you saw from Calmes. If he wanted to drive the basket, he could get there no problem. If he wanted to stand beyond the perimeter and shoot the ball, Carolina was giving him open looks from the outside. So they've got to figure out what is going on with this perimeter defense, why there are so many guys that sag so far into the paint and give these great looks to guys on the outside. We saw, even ones that didn't go down for Carolina, great looks all day for Wake Forest, and they were able to take advantage of it. A team, again, that we talked about coming in, wasn't shooting great from beyond the arc. And if you look at it in this game, it wasn't perfect for them from beyond the arc. But at the same time, the guys that you needed to take away, Juke Harris in the first half was outstanding. And then Nate Calmes in the second half was the guy that really stepped up. Those were two guys that we were focused on. We said coming into the game against them that, hey, those were two of their better perimeter shooters. Those were guys that you had to be able to find a way to take out of the game from that area, and Carolina couldn't do it. But it was also the offense. I mean, you scored 2 field goals in the final 9 minutes and 50 seconds of the game. How do you expect to win any game like that you aren't leading by 15 points? That's going to be the thing, is that, yeah, even if you do end up, getting a big lead like that, is that going to happen to you down the stretch of these games where teams are going to be able to completely get you out of what you were doing in the first half, and you're going to be settling for perimeter shots or going to the foul line? And look, the thing is that you may think, well, if Carolina is able to get to the foul line the way that they did, well, maybe that's a recipe for success. Carolina's still not shooting great from the free throw line. Still shooting around 70% from the foul line. That's not going to get it done in a lot of scenarios. And so that's just a recipe for disaster. Luckily for Carolina, they were up by enough in this game where it doesn't come back to bite them. But yeah, it's incredibly frustrating when you sit at home and you say, look at the way that Henri Veesaar and Caleb Wilson played in the first 30 minutes of the game. But then down the stretch of the game, we can't get them a touch at all. That's what I think really frustrated me. And one of those final 2 field goals was a Veesaar dunk. So when you did get it inside, it led to some success. I get it. Caleb Wilson had a turnover down low at one point, but that doesn't mean you should go away from it. For some reason, the guards weren't forcing the issue enough. It's on these guys, these big men too, to force the issue themselves and say, hey, you got to give me the basketball. And it's also on Hubert Davis to make sure that the guys are getting the ball to the inside, that message is being conveyed to the guys, which we don't know if it was and was just not being followed, or if this is, a thing where Hubert is not necessarily saying what needs to be said. But that's that. All in all, a frustrating finish to a game that shouldn't have been anywhere near as close as it was, and should have been much more comfortable for Carolina.
Yeah, look, people get worried when we say we're going to games and we're doing the media thing because of how we act, because they know how diehard, how passionate we are. Really good thing that I was not on Media Row, I think, last night. Now, the reason why I was not at the game was because I had to work and I had my heart broken watching the Panthers lose in the playoffs. But had I been trying to watch the last 9 minutes of the game, I would have had a conniption fit because I lost my ever-loving mind watching this team piss away that lead and take away, quite frankly, all the good feelings that I felt up until the last 9 minutes of the game. Mm-hmm. Like when it was 72-57, I felt really good where Carolina was at. I thought they had played really well offensively. I thought the defense was not where you wanted it to be. But some of it was Wake Forest making shots. But dude, you gave up 14 threes on 40% shooting. And like Hubert Davis said after the SMU game, at some point you're helping the team have the type of shooting night that they had. You know, Caleb Wilson was asked by Noah Weiskopf, "Hey, were you defended differently in the second half?" And he said no. And was asked, "Well, why'd you not get the ball as much?" And he just said, "I don't want to speak to that." My good buddy Josh Smilo DM'd me last night and asked me, why is this happening? Why did they not give him the ball? And, look, it's very rare that Carolina has a freshman that should be barking at upperclassmen, but that's where you're at. He's their best player. Mm-hmm. I feel more confident with the ball in his hands than with anyone else on the court outside of Henri Veesaar and outside of Seth Trimble when he's attacking in transition. And so I don't know if he doesn't feel empowered, but he needs to be able to walk into that huddle and he can say it the nice way or he can say it the mean way. Give me the freaking ball. I'm the best player on the court 9 times out of 10 when we walk on the court between the two teams. I don't know if there's been a game this year that there's been a better individual player on the floor than him. Maybe Darren Peterson of Kansas, maybe Fears from Michigan State. But outside of that, every game he's walked on the court, he's been the best freaking player on it. There should not be a situation, whether he's got the flu, I don't care if he had the craps at SMU. You don't get 3 touches the final 16 minutes. You don't get 2 shot attempts in the second half against a team that could not guard you. Could not guard him. And I saw time and time again, he had deep post position where if he gets the ball, he is either turning and dunking, laying it up, getting fouled, or all the above where he's finishing through contact and going through the foul line. And for whatever reason, the ball was not going as inside as it should have been. Carolina should have had more than 40 points in the paint. Wake Forest had nothing for them on the inside. Nothing. And so we'll be interested to really hear, when Hubert tapes his radio show tomorrow before they go west, kind of what he thought about that. Because quite simply, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if guys aren't giving him the ball, then put them on the bench. Like, I'm tired of seeing guys that can't shoot perimeter shots as opposed to giving our best player the ball. Or the second best player the ball. Because that's the other thing. It's not just a Caleb Wilson thing where he doesn't get the ball. The same thing happens with Henri Veesaar. He scores 25 points on 9 of 10 shooting. If we can sit here and praise the efficiency, and most certainly, congratulations to him. But how does he only take 10 shots? Now, he gets to the foul line 7 times, so he got fouled on some shot attempts. But how many other times is he having position, whether it's on the block or at the high post, and he's just being ignored so I can watch Kyan Evans or someone else just brick another 3-point shot? They've got to start playing to their strengths consistently. Because when they play to their strengths and they play through those 2 guys, you know what they do? They overwhelm opponents. They beat the crap out of opponents. But whenever they decide we want to stand outside and try to improve our 3-point shooting numbers, and last night they were 9 of 26 from 3. Not a great night, but 35% above their season average. You love the 9 makes. but you open the door to allow a team back into a game because now they're getting misses and running. And then defensively, excuse me, you can really tell that I'm fired up because I don't really cough this much. How the crap do you have a week off? And Hubert said, I played the cut on Friday's podcast. Was glad we had a week off to work on some things. How you give up 14 made threes? Because from what I could tell, they played defense the first 4 minutes of the game. They came out, and from the tip ball to the first TV timeout, I thought they defended. I thought they competed. And then they just quit. And the same stuff that happened at SMU happened again, where you got killed in the pick and roll. You could not keep the ball out of the middle of the floor. And too many times this defense is collapsing, trying to take away twos and giving up threes. And too many times they made those threes. And it's like I had a conversation with my dad because he somehow agrees with that philosophy, even though 3 is greater than 2. If you give up 14 threes, that's 42 points right there. They scored 42 points. Half of their points came from behind the 3-point line last night. Well, you know what you got to do on the offensive end to make up for that? You've got to score. You've got to make probably 20 plus 2-point field goals to really make the math equal out, because what it comes down to is a math equation. And luckily, Carolina did enough of that last night, but that should not be the case. I don't get how in the year in our Lord 2026, we're going under ball screens. I don't get why we sag off the 3-point line. I mean, half the time these guys are shooting threes that are uncontested because we've got 5 guys 10 feet inside the 3-point line. Yeah. I don't care if you're freaking Wemby. You ain't recovering and contesting that crap. And just, how do you have a week off and then you put that effort out there? Like, I say this a lot of times, and we would lose on Wednesday night because how much I would have ran them. And I feel like Hubert was mad. I feel like Hubert was frustrated. But if you didn't make any adjustments during a week off, do I expect you to make adjustments before you go out west and endure a West Coast road trip? I don't think so. And this could just be what Carolina is this year, where they're gonna get bombed away from the 3-point line because we ain't making adjustments that quite simply should have been made whenever we made the coaching change. There should have been a philosophical difference in the way Carolina plays 3-point defense. And it's why we continue to watch teams year after year come into our building and have big-time shooting nights because we don't want to play perimeter defense the way we should in modern-day college basketball.
Yeah, a big part of it is the fact that they switch everything. And again, we've talked about how this has become so popular. They talked about it on the broadcast last night, how this has become incredibly popular in the sport of college basketball because guys are just so much more athletic. And I get that. It makes sense that you can switch guys 1 through 5 at certain times during the game, but it shouldn't be the entire game because then it creates mismatches on the perimeter. And Carolina is switching every time they possibly can, and it creates mismatches. Guys, if you've got someone that's hot, if you've got someone that, like Nate Calmes, is going to dribble through ball screens and try to create a matchup that he likes, well, you can't be switching every single time to eventually give him the matchup that he likes. That doesn't make any sense, and that's what Carolina does so often, and that's exactly why they were able to take advantage of it in this game. This is a game where you needed to see, look, we said Juke Harris, you probably can't put Seth Trimble on him the entire game because, he's a guy that gives up a little bit of size. Juke Harris is going to be able to shoot over him. I think that the guy that you needed him to lock in on was Nate Calmes. Now, don't get it wrong. It wasn't like Seth was doing that great of a job defensively either. But when you're switching everything, it just creates these mismatches all over the floor. And we've seen that here, especially in these last couple of games where Carolina has had guys. I mean, look, I love the defender that Caleb Wilson is. I love the effort that he gives. And I like the length out there on the perimeter. But there are just times where he simply cannot stay with certain guys. And I think that is part of the problem that Carolina is dealing with. And then, yeah, when it comes to the perimeter defense, I mean, you're right. It's really just Every time that they can help, they seem to want to help. And it's not help that ends up trapping the ball, ends up creating a lot of turnovers. It did early in the game, but you needed to realize that, hey, man, when you're getting late and all of a sudden it's not creating those turnovers and it's leading to these shots from the outside, we can't help off a hot shooter. Somebody said that in the comments, and I agree with that. When there is a hot shooter, you can't always help off of that guy. You need to stay glued to that guy and say, somebody else, please beat us. Because even in the second half, it was one guy, it was two guys, but it was really one guy that beat you. And that was because Carolina wasn't doing what they needed to do to stay on him. That's one of those guys where I want you in his hip pocket. I want you to foul him a couple of times because you're playing such good defense on him. That's what you need to see. And that was not at all what we saw from Carolina. I thought their best perimeter defender last night, at least the guy showing the most effort, was Jaden Young. That's the reason that he was on the floor late in the game, was because he was one of the few guys that was actually showing effort on that end of the floor. That's unacceptable. You need to have a group that is motivated to defend. You were motivated to defend early in the season. We saw it with our own eyes. I mean, you defended very well for most of that game against Kansas. That could have easily been a game that got into the high 80s, high 90s with the way that those offenses were flowing at the time, and you didn't let it get there. You defended well in a game against Kentucky where you had to defend well because offensively you couldn't do anything. So where is that defense? We've seen that you're capable of doing it, but the last two games, we have not seen that at all. It just seems like it gets lackadaisical on that end of the floor at certain times, and it leads to these open shots. There needs to be some sort of answer for that if you're Hubert Davis, if you're these players on this team, because that's just unacceptable, man. You can't have these lackadaisical performances in conference play, because I'm going to tell you right now, as we sit here, this is a much, much better conference top to bottom than anybody thought coming into the season. I don't know how many teams are going to make the NCAA tournament ultimately. There may still be a bias against the ACC. We're going to find that out. But I'm going to tell you, there are no easy nights really in the ACC. There might be a couple along the way against teams that are really, really bad. But for the most part, you need to be locked in every single time you take the court, or there's a chance that you could get beat.
Take a look at the box score here. I'll pull it up for you guys watching back at home. Carolina shoots 53% from the field. They were 29 of 55. So really good, efficient offensive night from the field, but you allow 48% shooting from Wake Forest. They were 31 of 64. Carolina, as I mentioned, 9 of 26 from three, but, Wake Forest goes 14 of 35 for 40%. So you're -5 in that category right there. Free throw shooting, my God. Carolina, 20 of 30 from the foul line, 67%. Wake Forest, 8 of 11 from the foul line, 73%. So you are plus 12 on makes, plus 19 on attempts. But because you cannot shoot, what a Carolina basketball team should shoot, which is probably 78% or above, this game a lot closer than it should have been. Both teams committed some turnovers. Carolina, 14 turnovers, led to 17 points. Wake Forest, 13 turnovers. Carolina got 16 off of them. Rebounding in favor of Carolina, 35-27 on the glass. 22-17 on the defensive glass, 13-10 on the offensive glass, which gave Carolina a 21-11 second chance points advantage. Bench points in favor of Carolina, 22-19. Big reason why was Jaden Young. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. Points in the paint in favor of Carolina, 40-30. Both teams had 13 fast break points. Carolina had 2 blocks to their none. Carolina had more steals than Wake Forest, 10-9. Carolina had 20 assists on 29 made baskets. Wake Forest, 13 assists on 31 made baskets. The game was tied one time. Ultimately, Carolina led for 38 minutes and 56 seconds, despite winning by just 3 points. We'll now get to the quote of the game, and I'll read it really quickly from Hubert Davis. And this was kind of in reference to them taking the foot off the gas. Hubert said, quote, "There were a number of times we were up 12 to 15 points, And in those situations, you've got to get a stop, and before you know it, it's 19 or 20. In every one of those situations, we never took a step forward. We took our foot off the gas pedal on both ends of the floor. Take nothing away against a good team like Wake Forest. They're going to keep coming back, and as talented players as they are, that's why you're in a tight game, end quote. Hey, he's not wrong. They took their foot off the gas. I thought they took off. I think they took their foot off the gas, though, because Hubert Davis mandated them to. And this is a Hubert thing. We have seen this happen now for 5 years, where when Carolina's got a 10, 12-point lead around 8 minutes or so, all of a sudden I don't want to say they quit playing, but they take the air out of the ball, and they start walking the ball up the court. They start running the shot clock down to 10, 12 seconds before they even think about getting into an offensive set. And they really try to shorten the game. And I'm sure there have been plenty of times where it's worked out. Of course, the times where it doesn't stand out more often. But I don't get that mindset from him. I always reference this. I mean, I remember reading in Roy Williams' book where he would talk about, as a coach, if he was up 4 at the final media time, he wanted to beat you by 16 because he never wanted to quit attacking. He never wanted to quit pushing the issue. And I get there are certain times where it does make sense to burn clock. I do understand that. But last night, with the way that, that game was flowing, it did not make any sense because they could not stop you with the amount of possessions they were playing. I mean, Carolina had 72 points at the 10-minute mark. They finished the game with 87. And a big reason why is they quit forcing the issue. They quit playing aggressive. And at some point, man, your coach needs to want to stay aggressive and want to stay in attack mode. I think the lack of urgency from the bench permeated onto the court, and that's why Carolina found themselves in a dogfight, because all it took was about 2 minutes, and all of a sudden it was 72-65, and then it's 75-74, and now you're in a possession for possession game. And yeah, you made enough plays down the stretch, but I feel like if Carolina would have kept on the gas pedal and they would have just kept going at Wake Forest, the game doesn't get that close as it gets. Even if Wake Forest continues to make shots, I feel like Carolina would have just simply outscored them because, as the field goal percentage would suggest, they had no answer for Carolina defensively. That's why Carolina shot 53% from the field. And so Hubert can look at the players and say that they took their foot off the gas. I felt like he took his foot off the gas and wanted them to play that way. And it's a big reason why they got themselves in such a tight game late at home.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we've talked about this so many times on the podcast here, is that we just don't understand that mindset of let's slow the game down. Let's try to play it in the half court, when all night the fast break was working for you. The faster pace was leading to easier buckets for this team, and they simply could not stop your guys inside. That was when those guys were at their best, was when you were moving the ball down the floor at a high rate, and they could just get to the basket. I mean, you saw multiple times Caleb Wilson take the ball and drive it down the court himself and score it. But for some reason in the second half, once you got to that 9:50 mark, it's as if Hubert Davis said, hey, let's slow it down here and let's try to play a half-court game. And I just don't understand. That is not the area where you are going to succeed the most. We have said that throughout this year. We knew that before the season. We knew that was not going to be an area of strength for Carolina, whether they had Luka Bogovac or they didn't. And right now, they don't have Luka Bogovac. He is not doing anything for you on that end of the floor. He is a complete and utter failure when it comes to what you thought he was going to be coming over from the Adriatic League. There's no consistency there. He'll show up from time to time, but he's not a guy that you can rely on by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't understand that mindset of let's play a half-court game. Let's change the pace at which the game is being played. And if you want to counter and say, well, we know that's the pace that Wake Forest wants to play too, but you saw when you started playing that half-court pace, that was where Wake Forest really started to succeed. They could not keep up with you early in the game because of what you were doing pace-wise. So it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I get it, man. 2 minutes left in the game and you're up by 12 and you want to slow the pace down so that you're not throwing up a three-pointer with 21 seconds to go on the shot clock or something like that. Yeah, I get it. But when it comes to 10 minutes left to go in a game and you're up by 15, that's way too early to do that, to try to take your foot off the gas and really change the way that the game is being played. So I've never understood that mindset that he has. We've seen that so many times from him, and it just leaves us scratching our heads at home. But hopefully that's something that he learns from this game. Can't be used with this squad. You don't have a good enough three-point shooting team to be able to do that. And that's the main thing that you have to have if you're going to be a team that wants to play like that in the half court, especially if for some reason you're so stubborn you don't want to get the ball inside to your bigs. If you wanted to, that's fine. It would have been a much different game. But for a group that wants to stand on the outside and shoot threes, that's pretty much what they did in the game against SMU late, and that's why that game got out of hand. It doesn't make sense to do that. And also, as you mentioned, this team shot 67% from the foul line in this game. If you were a good free throw shooting team, then I could understand wanting to slow the game down, try to draw fouls, and win the game from the foul line because you were able to draw fouls. But the thing is you're not a good enough free throw shooting team to just be able to win the game from the line there. You did barely enough in this game. But that was because you got a couple of guys to the line late that luckily made their foul shots for you. And even still, it gave Wake Forest a chance to tie the game at the end because of their three-point shooting. Got to be smarter than that moving forward down the stretch. Hopefully that's something that we see, an adjustment that we see from Hubert Davis and this staff moving forward.
I've said it all along. You want to play in the half court, fine. We're not efficient enough. We don't run a good enough sets in the half court to play that way. That's just what it is, man. Like, and look, that was a criticism under Roy Williams too, where there were sometimes Carolina wasn't as clinical as they needed to be, but it's why they prided themselves on playing in the open floor to get those easy points. So again, this team isn't necessarily built to run and built to win shootouts. But they're not built to play in the half court either. They're much better because of how athletic they are when they're playing in a free-flowing manner. Did not make any sense to me why he took he wanted to take the air out of the ball that early in the second half. 9 minutes is a lot of time, man. That's a lot of time, especially with a 30-minute shot clock. And I think you got to be mindful of that. Also, by the way, didn't mention this. How in the crap did we not foul on the final possession up 3?
That's a great point. Yep, I thought the same thing.
How do you allow him to basically, now granted, it was a deep 3, but at that rate, he was seeing as big a rim as he had seen all night, and you allowed him to get off a pretty relatively clean look? That to me made no sense. Like, you foul. You absolutely, if you want to wait till they cross the timeline, I don't care. But there's no way you are allowing a team down 3 to get off a look from behind the three-point line. I don't know if maybe he watched how Kansas came back against TCU and was worried that his guys would foul. I don't know, but that's an adjustment where Hubert, hey, next time if we're up 3 on Wednesday, we're up 3 on Saturday, and there's 5 seconds to go, you need to foul. There's no way you're allowing them to get off a clean look from behind the three-point line that could send the game to overtime.
At least put more pressure on him.
Yeah.
Like, there was no pressure. That's the thing. Like, put some pressure on him, and if he picks up the foul there, then whatever. Send him to the line, and you end up making it a free throw game. But for some reason, they chose not to. They said, yeah, we're going to let a guy who is as hot as anybody in college basketball at this current time, based off of what he had done in the second half, we're going to let him get a clean shot at the rim because, again, we're not going to contest the 3. Wasn't very well contested even. It's just, yeah, that was what a disastrous finish all around. It's a miracle that they made it out of there with the win.
Yeah, no, it was the last 9 minutes was a demonstration of coaching malpractice. And luckily Carolina had built up a good enough of a lead to really overcome that. Side of the game, I wrote down free throw shooting. Carolina goes 20 of 30. That's 67%. Wake Forest, 8 of 11. So you're plus 20 in makes, plus 19 in attempts, but you shoot 6 percentage points worse because no one on this roster can make foul shots. Let's just go through the guys last night that took free throws. Kyan Evans, 1 for 3. Steph Trimble, 4 for 6. Caleb Wilson, 6 of 8. Henri Veesaar, 5 of 7. Jaron Stevenson, 2 for 2. Derek Dixon, 1 for 2. Jaden Young, 1 for 2. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You had 7 players shoot free throws, and only one of them was perfect from the foul line, and it was Jaron Stevenson, who, if he doesn't make those if he doesn't make those 2 free throws, who knows how this game plays out. But you're talking about your guards. Your guards combined to miss five free throws between Evans, Trimble, and Dixon. Well, 6 if you count Jaden Young. Yeah. But Jaden Young hasn't played enough. Now, granted, he had a good night last night to where you count on him being at the foul line every single night. It feels like every game Evans, Trimble, and Dixon are going to get there, and those guys cannot make free throws. And I know Hubert, has addressed this and says, look, they just got to keep putting in the work. But there is no denying this at this point in the season. One, this is a poor free throw shooting team. And second, there's going to be a game that Carolina is going to lose. And we will point back to their misses at the foul line and say that's why they got beat. Mm-hmm. The most efficient play in basketball is the foul shot because you're literally scoring while the clock is stopped. You had 30 chances to score the ball last night without the clock moving, and you only did it 20 times. And at some point, man, I don't know if this is it all looks good. Like the form looks good. It's just got to come down to you got to be mentally tough enough to go to the foul line and make shots. Because at this rate, I think it's a mental block where they've missed so many that they don't believe they're going to make them. I mean, every time Kyan Evans shoots, he's praying it's going to go in because that kid has no confidence. But it's not just him, man. It's your veteran guard, Seth Trimble, missing critical free throws down the stretch. You look at Caleb Wilson, Henri Veesaar, dude, those guys are bigs. And they're still a lot of times one of your better free throw shooters because of how often they get to the foul line. But, hopefully this is something that changes course during the season because if not, this could be something that costs this team a chance to win a game at Cameron, beat a team like Louisville at home. Because if you don't shoot the foul shot against good teams, 9 times out of 10, you don't win those games.
Yeah, I mean, and it could come back to cost you in a game that's close like this against an opponent that isn't necessarily all that good, but that you might let back in the game or might hit a ton of threes, and all of a sudden that's the reason why they're in the game. I mean, yeah, it comes down to just being tough enough to make shots at the foul line. And for this group, I just don't think they're a good enough foul shooting team. I think that's what you got to do. At times, you just got to call a spade a spade. And that's what you have to say with this team, is that they are just a terrible free throw shooting team. They're going to shoot 68% probably on the season, somewhere in that range. And it's going to end up costing them at least one game, if not maybe 2 or 3. That's what will probably be the undoing of this team. And that's what probably will allow them to exit the NCAA tournament when they do, is because they cannot shoot free throws. That's something that I think for us is really shocking, because even with these teams that we have had recently, these teams have been pretty good free throw shooting teams. It's been a long time. I don't even remember a team that has shot this poorly from the foul line. That is just something that Carolina has been pretty good at for most of their existence, is that they have been a really good foul shooting team. That is not the case this year. And unfortunately, I feel like it's going to be something that we're going to be talking a lot about here down the stretch of the season, especially if you're going to get to the foul line 30 times in a game. Well, then you better shoot a better percentage than 67%. That's all I can say.
All right, let's get to more thoughts, more takeaways. I think we've said all we've got to say about Carolina's defensive woes in this game. I think the big talking point that we got to figure out is maybe, is this who Carolina is defensively? You know, you get to the SMU game not allowing more than 75 points in a contest. Last two games, you've allowed 97 points and 84 points and a combined 27 made three-pointers. Carolina's got to make adjustments on that end of the floor if they want to realistically compete in this ACC that's top heavy with teams like Duke, teams like Virginia, two teams that can really score it as well as any two teams in the conference. We got to talk about a new starting lineup that we saw from Hubert Davis. And look, credit to him. He played this very close to his vest. He wasn't asked about maybe any lineup changes, but did not even hint at them when he met with the media on Friday afternoon. But he opts to start Jaron Stevenson at that 3 spot, moves Luka Bogovac down to the bench. So you have Kyan, Trimble, Stevenson, Wilson, and Veesaar in the starting lineup. What did you make of that adjustment? Because our good buddy Greg Ward, we had a pretty lengthy just back and forth today. He messaged me on Facebook wanting to run through some lineup ideas, and I don't think it was necessarily the wrong decision. I do think Jaron Stevenson, you love having his length and his size on the perimeter. He scores 4 points, was 1 of 6 from the field last night in 21 minutes, but you could also argue that, he may not have been the best guy to start. Maybe Jonathan Powell makes more sense at the 3 spot. And we can kind of piggyback off of this with what Carolina got last night. Something needs to be done at the point guard spot because Kyan Evans continues to struggle. 4 points, 1 of 6 from the field, all 6 attempts from behind the 3-point line. But initially, your thoughts on Jaron Stevenson being reinserted back into the starting lineup the first time since Seth Trimble went out with that injury.
Yeah, I can't be angry at it because what I think it was they were trying to do something differently defensively. I think honestly, when you look back early in the season when Carolina was defending at its best, it was because Jaron Stevenson was defending at a pretty high level. Now that didn't necessarily show in this game against Wake Forest. You were still they were still hitting a ton of shots from the outside. So ultimately, it really didn't matter if he was in the starting lineup or not. But I mean, to me, it was just a move that was trying to show that something had to change from that game against SMU. And I think the message was trying to be sent on that defensive end of the floor. Did it work? Not necessarily. Early in the game, it did. Carolina was creating some turnovers. It looked like it was a different group that was out there. There was a different mentality than in the game against SMU. That's, I guess, the difference in this game is that if you want to look at it and say, how concerned should we be about how bad this defense is? Early in the game, Carolina was not that bad defensively. They were creating turnovers. They were doing the things that they had to do. It was just they were still allowing a decent amount of threes to allow them to stick around. I think in the second half, that's where you really saw some things start to fall apart, where Cal Mees was just able to simply take over. Guys were able to get where they wanted to go on the court with ease and get some of those looks that you weren't giving up in that first half. And so hopefully for Carolina, if they do roll with this starting lineup again, they can put together a more complete game, because I think that's ultimately what Carolina was looking for in this one, was a more complete game. And maybe Jonathan Powell does bring that to you. 6'6", brings the intensity on the defensive end of the floor, has more 3-point shooting chops than a guy like Jaron Stevenson. Because again, we've talked about it with Jaron Stevenson. Really, there are a lot of times where on the offensive end, you're playing 4-on-5. But I mean, the thing is that for the most part in this game, I mean, Carolina was looking good offensively until those final 10 minutes of the game Whereas we talked about a big part of that was that Hubert Davis wanted to slow things down and play in the half court. So I didn't think it was really affecting you all that much. I think to me, if they want to run that lineup back out again, I wouldn't mind it in the slightest. It's just, I think they were trying to get a different look without Luka Bogovac on the floor, get a little more of a defensive lineup out there. And that's the reason that he chose to go with Jaren Stevenson.
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say after what happened yesterday, Luka Bogovac is playing his way out of the rotation. 9 minutes last night, 0 of 4 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3, with 1 assist against 2 turnovers. Look, I don't want to say he's a complete – well, at this rate, he's been a miss. The Carolinas missed on him. The player that you thought you were getting from the Adriatic League has not showed up. I think it's 2 things. I think the athleticism at this level is overwhelming for him. And I think the physicality, even at the college level, is overwhelming for him compared to what he dealt with overseas. The good news is that he's going to have to probably stay in college another year because he has no NBA draft stock. And maybe he re-ups and is a much better player next year. I don't see him being a difference maker for Carolina the rest of the season like we have kind of stressed him needing to be for this team to reach its ceiling. When I look at the 3 spot, really conflicted because I love Jaren Stevenson's size and his length and his versatility when you do want to switch some stuff, because when you're switching, if you're switching your 3 through 5s, he can hold his own if he gets switched on to a stretch 4 or even a big man. But offensively, what happened against SMU is the anomaly. That's not going to be what he's going to be every time on the floor where he's going 5 of 6 from 3 and making multiple 3-point shots. And so what do you value more? I think is what Hubert Davis has to really come to grips with. Jonathan Powell playing 12 minutes last night was criminal. He's too good of a shooter, and at his size and with his intensity, is he the defender that Stevenson is? No, but he's not as much as a negative as Luka Bogovac is. Like, he can handle himself out there. And so, it's always, we talk about, it's not about who starts, it's about who finishes. But I do think, there should not be a 9-minute discrepancy in Jared Stevenson's minutes and Jonathan Powell's minutes, because what they both do at their strength really helps you. You need to maximize that more than what Hubert Davis was able to do last night. We'll be interested to see what he does on Wednesday night when Carolina plays their first of 2 games out west. We got to talk about my guy, Jaden Young. This is a guy I was really excited about when he transferred in from Virginia Tech, was kind of a late addition to the roster back in the offseason. And I went on with Isaac Shade of Locked On Tar Heels and thought he was going to have a big role that would diminish as the season moved along. It's kind of been the opposite, where he's had no role, and it's increased as we've gotten deeper and deeper into the season, mainly because Hubert Davis loves his energy, loves his intensity on the defensive end on the floor, puts a lot of pressure on the ball, guards his man, and does what he needs to do. But was a big scoring lift for Carolina last night. 12 points, 4 of 6 from the field, goes 3 of 5 from 3 in 20 minutes. He did take a 3 late in the game that I did not like, but I understood why he took that shot, the way he had shot the ball all night. And Carolina doesn't win this game without Jaden Young. I'm very confident in saying that with what he was able to do. Yes, primarily as a scorer, but just also providing some added perimeter depth, for a backcourt that outside of Seth Trimble is just seeking and searching for consistency. And there's no denying after last night, he has carved out a role on this roster. And I think now the question is how high does that role climb? Does he play his way into a starting position? I would argue no, but I could see him playing 20 minutes a night, much more consistent moving forward here in ACC play.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, around the time of last year where he really started to turn it on for Virginia Tech. Now, I don't want him shooting nearly as much as he had to shoot for them, but I do think that there is something to this, that maybe this is just the time of the year where he starts to heat up. He starts to show his best basketball is when he's playing in ACC play. You got what you needed from him last night. You needed someone, and Carolina's looking for that consistent shooter off the bench. We want to see more of Jonathan Powell because we like the defensive intensity that he brings. We think that he's got, some shooting chops from the outside. But the fact of the matter is he hasn't even been that consistent from the outside. And so maybe Jaden Young is going to be that guy. Maybe he's the guy that starts to become more efficient. His numbers at Virginia Tech wouldn't tell you that. But I think that you do wonder. I mean, you look at last night, 3 of 5 from beyond the arc. I mean, if he's going to give you that every night, you'll take that. That production would be massive for you off the bench. And so I would definitely like to see more of him moving forward. I'll tell you that. I mean, he showed last night that he deserves to play a little bit more for Carolina and be able to help this team off the bench because they're looking for more consistent perimeter shooting. I mean, last night wasn't bad for Carolina from the perimeter, 9 of 26. But that's still only 34, a little over 34%, around 35% if you round up. Still not great for Carolina, but a little bit better. And I think that's in large part because you had a guy that made 3 threes off the bench for you. And if you can get both him and Powell as guys off the bench that can really knock down the 3, well, then you've got something going for you. Or if you insert Powell into the starting lineup and Jaden Young is that guy that's coming off the bench that can really heat up from the outside, then that would be huge. I love the defensive intensity that he played with last night. I think that was one of the things I pointed out earlier that I think really stood out and should have stood out to a lot of Tar Heel fans is that there weren't a lot of guys that were playing well defensively last night. There were guys that looked like they were just standing around and just letting shots drain in from the outside. He was one of those guys that was contesting everything possible. And yeah, were shots still being made? Yes. When you let a team heat up like that, it's hard to slow them down once they get into a rhythm. I think that was part of the reason why some of those shots were going down, because I thought some of the ones that he was contesting, he was doing a real good job of. So I want to see more of him moving forward. It's just a matter of will Hubert Davis play him, because we've noticed some of the rotations here have been weird. I mean, you go from, there was one game where we thought Luka only played 10 minutes in the game, meant we weren't going to see him. The next game, he ends up playing like 29 minutes or something like that. So we have seen some weird rotations throughout the season. It's just a matter of being a little bit more consistent if you're Hubert Davis with your rotation so that guys understand what exactly their role is with this team. And coming off of that performance from Jaden Young, I don't see how you can't play him more when you go out west here for this 2-game swing. At least give him a chance to show you that he can be a consistent contributor for you.
All right, last thing we'll talk about before we get to our discussion topic, and we'll try to do it very, very quickly as we're running here late on a Sunday night. Carolina's point guard play under Hubert Davis has reached an all-time low. And this is – you're getting kind of the same production that you got back during the 2019-2020 season when Cole Anthony was injured and you were starting – I mean, you had KJ Smith start at point guard, Leaky Black start at point guard. Carolina's getting nothing from this position last night. You look at Kyan Evans, 22 minutes, 4 points, 1 of 6 from the field, all threes, 1 of 3 from the foul line, did have 4 assists, 2 turnovers. Derek Dixon scores 4 points in 13 minutes, 1 of 5 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3, did have 1 assist, did have 1 turnover. You go look at the plus minus if you subscribe to that. Kyan Evans was a +8. Derek Dixon was last night, he was -2 for his time on the court. Regardless, we've been here and I've been saying this and I've been reiterating this. We're not gonna go where we want to go. We're not gonna get where we want to get to if this is what Carolina keeps getting from the point guard position. It's just not gonna happen. Point guard play is too freaking important in conference play. It's too important in tournament play, whether it's conference tournament or NCAA tournament action. And look, usually I'm arrogant, cocky enough to think that I have an answer, that I have a solution. I come to you and And I say, I don't know what to do. I have no idea what Carolina should do. I have no idea what Hubert Davis should try, because I don't know if there's an easy fix, if there's an easy answer. As I mentioned, me and our good buddy Greg Ward, we had a great back and forth today, and he was talking about this, and I'll bring it over. So I'm starting Dixon now and letting him mature and grow at the point he isn't worse than Evans and has more upside. But I don't even know if I agree with that, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Greg. Like, this team needs Kyle Evans shooting. Like, if he's not going to start shooting the ball better, they're still going to win a good number of games to finish top 4 in the league and get a good seed come Selection Sunday. They're not going to make the second weekend. You're just not. I don't know if Derek Dixon is the shooter that Kyle Evans is. I don't think he's even as athletic as Kyle Evans is. I don't think he's as good as a defender as Kyle Evans is. But he looks more confident. There's more maturity. He does look more stable at times. I've thought about, maybe putting Seth Trimble on the ball more. But, then the problem with him is the way he generates and creates offense. It's a lot of dribbling. It's a lot of guys standing around because he's such a great driver that it's not even, he doesn't even need a pick and roll, but guys just get caught standing there. I don't know if Jaden Young is someone that we talk about just having a bigger role. Is that a guy that can come on and play the one at Carolina? I don't know. And I come, it's very rare. I don't have an answer or an idea. All I know is they need more, but I'm no longer confident they're going to get what they need from that position, because we've got 16 games of data. Kyle Evans, as of this moment, cannot play at this level. And Derek Dixon, outside of his moment at Kentucky, followed up by what he did against a really bad Georgetown team, just quite simply isn't ready to be the guy that I think this roster needs him to be to maximize Caleb Wilson's lone season in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to keep doing the same things that you're doing, where it's just these two that are primarily going to play the point guard position for you, then I agree with Greg. I think at this point, it makes more sense to throw out a freshman that's going to be more of a part of what you're doing moving forward than Kyle Evans, who may not even be here next year. If we're being honest, it could be a one and done for him, and you end up moving on, and he ultimately goes back to a lower level or just a new school where he can maybe find better success. I think that the only thing that I can come up with is moving Seth Trimble on the ball and allowing him to be a guy that can create on his own. But again, it's, as you said, it really stagnates your offense. It definitely, resembles a lot of what last year's offense looked like. And so that's the issue that you sort of run into. Can you live with that? Can you live with that being the type of offense that you have? Look, your resume is much different this year. You're in a much better spot at this point of the season than you were last year. But can you live with, going through the rest of conference play, playing very similar to the way that you played last season because of the guy that is controlling the ball for you in the half-court sets and everything like that? I think that might be what you have to do, though, because especially if Powell starts playing better, more consistent, or Jaden Young, I think the solution might be to move one of those two guys to the 2 in the starting lineup and just have Seth Trimble as your starter at point guard. And you just cut your losses with the 2 guys that you've got right now. Not saying you don't play Derek Dixon at all. Not saying that you don't play Kyle Evans at all. Kyle Evans could be a guy that comes off the bench as someone that plays that 2-guard spot and really catches and shoots, and that's all that he necessarily does. I think that could be a direction that you go. But again, this is me just making things up while I go. I have no idea what the best solution would be, because it feels like in years past, there was a solution. Well, we don't necessarily want to do this, but here's the solution to the problem. This year, it doesn't feel like there really is a great answer to that question. And that's why we sit here, and every time that we are on an edition of the podcast, we have to ask that question over and over again. Do we believe that they have a solution at this point guard spot. And I think right now you're getting to this point. I mean, guys, we just passed the halfway point of the regular season here. When you've gotten to this point and you still don't have any answers, there is no clear answer. So I think they should be willing to move Seth Trimble onto the ball, but you have to stomach the fact that your offense is going to look a lot like last year's offense. And that's something that I think we were hoping Carolina would be able to avoid this season.
Yeah, I think this is where the Trimble injury was just really unfortunate, was because if this would have happened during non-conference season, I think Hubert Davis his hand would have been forced a lot sooner, because you could have really tinkered with some stuff and against some of those bye games. But you got Trimble back literally for Ohio State, which was, a pretty significant game, and then you had ECU, and then you had 8 days off when you were in conference play. But as you mentioned, and this will get us to our discussion topic, we crossed the halfway point of the season over the weekend. We're halfway through the year. Carolina's 14-2. They're 2-1 in the league, and I know this tone has been. I'm not going to say it's negative. I think it's come across frustrated. I mean, my buddy Smilo DM'd me and said, "Well, I don't like the negativity." Well, guess what? Play better. This is Carolina basketball. There's an expectation that we expect, and quite simply, when you start 11-12-1, and you're putting yourself in the same conversation as 2008, 2009, 1997, 1998, 1981, 1982, then we expect you to meet that. And look, 3 weeks ago we were talking about this team competing for a conference championship and making the argument for them to maybe be a national title contender. I sit here today, and the discussion is where is our confidence level with this team at right now? I am no longer confident that this team's capable of winning the ACC or advancing to a Final Four. As we sit here at the halfway point, I think they'll finish top 4. I think right now they're the third best team in the league. I'd go Duke. I'd have Virginia second. I'd have Carolina third, with whoever you want to put there in that 4 spot, whether it's Louisville, Miami, NC State, Clemson's really come on. SMU competed yesterday at Duke without Boopy Miller. Whoever you want to put in that 4 spot, I don't really care. I think Carolina's top 3 in the league good. I don't know if they're second weekend of the tournament advancing good. And that's not where we should be at 14-2. It's just not. We should feel a lot more confident that this team is going to achieve some really big things. And we get in this conversation where we don't want to waste seasons or careers. Big topic we had when Sam Howell was Carolina's quarterback, because you didn't really achieve anything. Nothing you could point back to. I don't want to say that that's going to happen with Caleb Wilson, because he's doing so much explosive stuff that he's going to get some awards and accolades along the way. But the thing that Carolina has to do is maximize Caleb Wilson, because, fellas, he ain't coming back next year. Like, I know in the NIL world, we think guys will come back and turn down guaranteed pro money. With where he's going to be going in the NBA draft, he ain't coming back, and he should not come back. So we've got to maximize him, and I thought we were trending towards that, where we were going to maximize what he could achieve and be one of the best one-and-done freshmen in terms of production and success. But I don't have that feeling right now. I think he's still going to be, as individually, a great individual freshman, but I don't think this team right now is poised to win and maximize his talent, and that should not be the tone I should have at 14-2 and 2-1 in ACC play.
Yeah, I mean, if they get a good draw in the bracket, they could maybe make a run to an Elite Eight, because of the fact that they've got someone that's as talented as Caleb Wilson is, and they got someone that's playing at the level that Henri Veesaar is, and really just has raw talent as well. I mean, I need to give him credit there for what he brings to the table. But I think, with the backcourt, as we've talked about, especially that point guard spot, I just don't know if there is enough there for this team right now. And until they get answers at that position, I'm back to where I was in the preseason with them. As you said, I had them third in the conference. That's where I would put them probably right now. I mean, Virginia's off to an amazing start to the Ryan Odom era, and it looks like they might be the second best team in this conference, but behind Duke, who I think clearly is probably going to win this conference right now. And I think that Carolina is probably closer to those teams at 3. They're probably closer to the teams that are 4th, 5th, 6th in the ACC as opposed to the top 2 teams in the conference. It's sad to think that, and especially with a 14-2 record, I think there might be some people that are saying to themselves, how is this possible? How are we listening to this on this podcast? But if you just look at the way that the team is playing, and even if you go back to some of those games that we talked about in the non-conference, there were some games, that started to hint to you that maybe this team really wasn't as good as we thought they were. Mainly, I think the game that really sticks out is a game like Navy, where that was a game that you felt like Carolina should have put away, should have won by a lot more, and they didn't. It ended up being a 12-point game. Navy made it a little bit tighter than that, even down the stretch of the game, and that was one that they left frustrated with. I think that element of this team is going to be there. There are going to be games against opponents that they should be able to beat pretty handedly that they just won't be able to ultimately beat handedly when it comes down to it. And a lot of that, I think, is due to the fact that they are a team that's not going to be able to defend the 3. They're not going to get consistent enough point guard play for them to succeed at the level that they need to on both ends of the floor to be a national title contender. And so those are the 2 main areas that they've got to get better in. I think there were some other areas that we were concerned about, but I think now those are the 2 areas that we're really talking about. And, I have to admit, somebody pointed it out to me after the Florida State game. I reacted and thought, after the Florida State game, hey, you know what? Let's focus on the win. This team is still off to a great start to the season. Let's focus on the win and not focus on the negatives of a game where Carolina just didn't defend the 3 well. Well, that was something that I probably should have looked into a little bit more. And now as we sit here, 3 games into the conference season, it's become evident that this is not a great 3-point defensive team. So unless they can get that area cleaned up, I think it's still possible. That's the thing, is that there's still time for this team to be able to adjust and to be able to get back into that conversation as one of the better teams in the ACC and as one of those teams that can compete for a national title. But as I sit here right now, I'm looking more at a team that's probably going to be around a 5 or 6 seed, where I had them coming into the regular season, in the NCAA tournament, which isn't, awful, but certainly isn't great. Certainly not where we would expect to be when we're sitting here at 14-2. But I definitely think that, Carolina is in a spot where they were looked at as a team that wouldn't shock anybody if they made it to the second weekend, but it also wouldn't shock anybody if they end up going home in the first weekend in that round of 32 either.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, guys, we will direct you guys to the website. That's heeltoughblog.com. Busy weekend for the site. Obviously, we had you covered with the Wake Forest game. Anthony had the recap because of my WFNZ duties. If you want to go and check that out, feel free to do so. Bigger thing on the website this weekend was continued additions to the transfer portal for Carolina football, with some more guys entering the portal, as well as Carolina's roster is starting to come to its full form. Carolina is closing in on its roster limit for the upcoming season, but as they continue to add to the portal while also losing guys to it, but all that, whether it was either the guys that committed to Carolina or left the school, Anthony had you covered on that front. Pretty much been a one-man machine this weekend, cranking out all the articles for Carolina football and Carolina basketball. So get to the website, heeltoughblog.com, for the latest and best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. For the next game, the preview will go up as always on game day. It's a late game because Carolina's out west. The recap will come your way the next day, but be on the lookout for all of our great coverage on the website. And as for the podcast, you know what to do. We encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Just search for the Four Corners Podcast. It will pop up. And like I said, there we want you to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. If you're a visual consumer of the podcast, the best way to keep up with us, like and follow us on Facebook at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second we go live, you'll get a notification set to your mobile device. You can jump in and be a part of our conversation talking Carolina basketball. With that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.